Welcome to Meteorology Matters. We've got some really interesting stuff to look at today. It's kind of this whole mix of laws and atmospheric science and how we're figuring out like what's going on up in our skies. Specifically, we're focusing on this bill in Alabama, a law passed in Tennessee just last year in 2024, and then diving into how critical thinking plays into some beliefs about what's happening in our atmosphere.
Yeah, it's this fascinating blend of policy and people's perceptions. Our goal today is to understand what's driving these developments, the motivations and the logic behind them. And we want to do it without getting bogged down in too much technical stuff.
Right, exactly. Before we get going, just a reminder that if you're interested in more combos like this, you can follow meteorologist Rob Jones. He's on Instagram, meteorologist, TikTok, TV meteorologist, and on YouTube, subscribe to Rob Jones Hurricane. That's also where you'll find the playlist for this podcast, Meteorology Matters.
Okay, let's jump right in. Let's start with what's going on in Alabama. There's a bill in the Alabama House Economic Development and Tourism Committee, and it's about something they call chemical weather control.
Okay, so the first thing that pops out is how Representative Butler is talking about this. It seems like this bill comes from a worry about too much federal power. Like it's another example of the national government forcing its will on Alabama. It kind of gets at this larger issue of state versus federal authority. Yeah, totally. And the main goal of this bill is to actually ban any chemical weather control activities from happening inside Alabama's borders. It's a pretty strong statement. It's interesting, the first draft of the bill didn't have any punishments for breaking it, but they recently changed it to make it a Class A misdemeanor. And that comes with a big $100,000 fine. That's a big jump in how serious they're taking this.
Definitely sends a message that they're serious about stopping this, at least from Representative Butler's side. The bill also wants to set up a way for people to report if they think someone's breaking the rules. And they're thinking of making an Alabama Air Pollution Control Fund run by the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. Looks like they're trying to create a whole system to track and enforce this.
But not everyone's on board. Representative Witt, he's the committee chair, seems pretty doubtful that there's a real threat here. He's saying they'll make decisions based on evidence and facts. And personally, he doesn't buy the idea that the government's in on some big conspiracy to use chemtrails to poison people. He even said he's been watching airplane contrails his whole life, and to him, that's pretty good proof that it's all just normal stuff.
He makes a really important point about needing facts to back up any laws. What he's seen himself actually lines up with how scientists say contrails form. We'll get into that a bit more later. Oh, and he also brought up something very practical. How could Alabama actually make sure people follow this ban, especially when flights start outside the state? That would be a really tough thing to do.
Now, there's Stephanie Durnan. She's with Health Freedom Alabama, and she's all for this bill. She points out that more than 20 other states, including Florida, have thought about making similar laws. And we know Tennessee actually passed one. She argues that these climate intervention experiments are a real danger, and Alabama shouldn't be a place where they test these dangerous new geoengineering schemes.
What she's saying reflects a growing worry among certain groups about the possible risks of messing with the climate on purpose. She uses the word geoengineering, and it might be good to explain what that means, just briefly. It's like an umbrella term for all these ideas about technologies that could be used to change Earth's climate system intentionally. Stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, is one example that's gotten a lot of attention. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
And our source material actually gives some background here. It mentions a report from 2023 by the Congressional Research Service. It's called Solar Geoengineering and Climate Change. And this report talked about some of the ideas they've come up with, like stratospheric aerosol injection, which is where they basically put particles into the stratosphere to bounce sunlight back into space.
The big point this report makes is that as of May 2023, these were mostly just theories. No one had actually done any large-scale experiments. The report also mentions some potential benefits of SAI, like maybe it could slow down the rise in global temperatures and give countries time to switch from fossil fuels. So this is the scientific context for all this worry about geoengineering.
Exactly. But Durnan's worried about the health risks from spraying unknown substances, especially because, in her words, it's the same people who lecture us about climate change who are doing it. Seems like there's a lot of distrust there. And it's interesting how this ties into all these bigger conspiracy theories. Like, the source material mentions how after Hurricane Helene, there were all these theories that the government was controlling the weather, that they made the storm go a certain way. And we even saw how meteorologist James Spann said he was getting threats because of misinformation about the hurricane.
It really shows how emotional these conversations can get, especially when they're about extreme weather events. People naturally want to understand why these things happen, and they can create a situation where these theories that aren't based on facts spread like wildfire. Sometimes it even leads to experts getting harassed, even though they're just trying to share real information.
All right, so let's move on to the law in Tennessee. We talked about how they actually passed a law about chemicals in the air. While they were debating this bill, chemtrails did come up. But the guy who introduced the bill, Monty Fritz, mostly talked about cloud seeding.
Fritz's reasoning is pretty straightforward. He believes that if you put chemicals into the atmosphere on purpose to control the weather or the climate, it will hurt people's health. He's basically being cautious, worried about unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's how it seems. But the reaction to this Tennessee bill from some people was pretty interesting. This representative, John Ray Clemens, he's a Democrat, he proposed a change to the bill as a joke. Like, he wanted to add in protection for fictional creatures like Bigfoot. He was making it clear that he didn't think the law was serious at all. He even said some lawmakers believe in QAnon and those vaccine conspiracies. So this law kind of fits into a bigger picture of what some people believe.
That reaction from Representative Clemens shows how skeptical some people are about these bills, even making fun of them. They just don't see any real danger. And what he said about people believing other theories that aren't true suggests there might be a pattern in how these folks think, maybe a shared view of the world.
And get this, a spokesperson for Representative Fritz defended the bill. They said it's meant to make sure our air, water, and soil are cleaner, and that they're just giving people information and letting them decide what to believe. It looks like there's a big difference in how they see the risks. Oh, it's also worth pointing out that the people who spoke in favor of this bill in Tennessee, some of them came from other states, and they've supported similar laws elsewhere. It makes you think there's a bigger movement here, maybe even organized, about these worries.
That's important. It shows that this isn't just one state being worried. It's more widespread. People are traveling to support these laws, so they must really believe it's a problem that needs to be fixed right away.
Okay, so now let's get to the big question. Why are these chemtrail conspiracy theories so popular? The source material says that people started speculating about this more when there were more airplanes and contrails in the sky.
Yeah, if you think about it, that makes sense visually. More people see those white lines hanging in the sky, so naturally they start wondering what they are and what they're made of. And if people don't really understand how contrails form, all those lines in the sky become fuel for theories.
Right, and we're seeing a comeback of conspiracy theories in general, not just chemtrails, but stuff like those vaccine theories too. One source we looked at called it being detached from facts and rational analysis. That's a pretty strong way to put it.
It sounds like they think people are losing trust in the usual sources of information. Maybe they're looking for different explanations, even if those explanations are backed up by evidence. That's a perfect situation for conspiracy theories to grow.
So for anyone who might not know, the scientific explanation for contrails is pretty simple. It's just water vapor from the jet engines. Up in the cold air, it condenses and freezes into ice crystals.
Exactly. Jet engines make water vapor, and it's super cold up in the atmosphere. So those water molecules end up condensing around tiny particles in the exhaust, and they form ice crystals. That's what we see as contrails. And depending on things like the humidity and temperature, they either disappear fast or stick around, and can even spread out to look like those thin, wispy cirrus clouds.
But of course, the chemtrail conspiracy theory says it's not just water vapor. They say it's chemicals, sprayed by the government for some secret, evil reason. The reasons change all the time, from controlling the weather to trying to control how many people there are.
And if you look at the root of it, people who believe in the chemtrail theory are often worried about real issues, things happening in society and with the environment. They don't trust the government, they worry about the planet, and sometimes they've had health problems that they can't explain. All that can make this theory attractive. It gives them a simple answer for things that seem complicated and scary. It makes things seem less chaotic, you know?
Yeah, and like we said, the fact that you can actually see contrails really makes the theory seem more believable. Someone who believes in chemtrails even told researchers, chemtrails have been the most interesting conspiracy because it's right in front of our face and we still choose to ignore it. Really shows how convinced they are by what they're seeing.
Right, it's like they think the evidence is obvious and anyone who disagrees is just choosing not to see the truth. That can lead to a really strong feeling of certainty among believers.
And within these groups of believers, they all agree with each other so much that it overrides any scientific evidence that contradicts them. It's super hard to change their minds with facts once those beliefs are so ingrained.
That's why these theories are so hard to debunk. When everyone around you believes the same thing, It validates your own beliefs and makes you feel like you belong. It's a powerful force that often outweighs any outside information, even if it's scientifically accurate.
One of the things we read said that critical thinking skills are actually more important than just being smart when it comes to figuring out if these conspiracy theories are true.
That makes a lot of sense. Sure, intelligence helps you process information, but critical thinking is more about using reasoning skills, questioning what you hear, looking for proof, and having some knowledge about the topic. If you're lacking in any of those areas, you're more likely to believe things that aren't true, no matter how smart you are.
Exactly. And the research shows that people who don't buy into these theories are usually better at critical thinking. They understand science better, and they're more likely to think critically, to be skeptical, and look at things rationally.
And on the other hand, the people who do believe these theories are often more cynical. They go with their gut feeling more than anything. It fits with what psychologists say about how we think. We've got two ways of thinking. One's more analytical and careful, the other's more intuitive and emotional. Conspiracy theories seem to appeal to that second way of thinking, the one that's driven by emotions.
And of course, the internet's a huge factor here. It's this massive platform for all kinds of media, and it creates communities where these chemtrail beliefs and worldviews are totally accepted and encouraged.
The internet's a strange place, and it can actually make it harder to figure out what's true. There's just so much information, and it's hard to know what's reliable. Plus, you have these online communities that all interpret things in the same way, so it becomes tough to separate real information from misinformation. People can get trapped in these belief systems without even realizing it.
And the research even suggests that conspiracy theories can be a way for people to show they're unhappy with those in power, find a community of people who think like they do, and even be entertained by trying to uncover what they believe is the truth.
Yeah, those are real needs that conspiracy theories can fulfill. It makes people feel like they have some control in a world that feels overwhelming, like they belong to a group. And it gives them a story that explains why confusing or scary things happen.
But here's the problem. Just giving people the facts to debunk a theory doesn't usually work. That's mostly because the way they see the world, their online friends, and how they use the internet, it all stops them from even seeing the evidence that proves them wrong, or they twist it to fit what they already believe.
It's called confirmation bias. People naturally look for information that supports what they already believe. And in online echo chambers, that's even worse because everyone's sharing the same ideas, so it's almost impossible for real evidence to get through.
And it's not uncommon for people to believe in lots of conspiracy theories, and the theories often connect with each other. A classic example is how people link chemtrails to HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Some people think HAARP is part of a government plot to control the weather, too.
And when these theories all connect, it makes the whole conspiratorial worldview stronger. If someone believes one conspiracy, they're more likely to believe others that are based on similar ideas about secret agendas and powerful people you can't trust.
A lot of this comes from not trusting authority figures, whether it's the government or the mainstream media. This often comes from bad experiences or a feeling that everyone's corrupt. So they go to social media to get their news because they see it as an alternative to the mainstream narrative that they think is being controlled.
That lack of trust makes it really hard for them to accept official explanations or what scientists agree on. Social media gives them a different source of information, where they feel like they're in control of what they see and who they trust. They tend to go for sources that agree with their skepticism.
And certain types of media, like documents that look official, pictures and videos, are really convincing to believers, even if they're taken out of context or just wrong. And this stuff gets shared over and over on different platforms and in online groups, creating those echo chambers we talked about.
And when you see the same information repeated so many times, it starts to feel like there's a ton of evidence, even if the original source isn't reliable or is being presented in a misleading way. Images and videos are especially powerful because they have such a strong visual impact. People often react to them emotionally without stopping to analyze the information.
Research shows that figuring out why people believe in these conspiracy theories is really about understanding how they interact with each other. These online communities are super important for shaping how they make sense of the world. And when someone stops believing in a theory, it's usually because their whole worldview changes. Someone manages to debunk it in a way that really addresses their worries, or maybe they just stop getting as much out of those online interactions.
It's not just about presenting the facts. It's about building trust. understanding why they believe what they do, and having respectful conversations outside of those echo chambers where their beliefs are constantly being reinforced.
So as you can see, all this stuff about weather modification, chemtrails, and the laws being made in places like Alabama and Tennessee, it's all tied together with science, politics, and how we take in information and form our beliefs.
It's a perfect example of how scientific knowledge, personal beliefs, and the government all interact. It's interesting how the government's trying to deal with these concerns, even when they're based on theories that don't have any scientific backing.
So what do you think is the most important thing we've learned today? What do you make of this connection between science, people's beliefs, and the laws being made?
What really strikes me is how strong these beliefs are, even though scientists have proven them wrong, and how the internet, with all its social aspects and technology, makes these beliefs even stronger. It shows how important it is to teach people to think critically, and how tough it is to get them to believe things that are actually true in a world full of so much information, some of it reliable and some of it not.
It definitely makes you wonder, how can we get people to look at information more critically while still respecting their opinions and sticking to the facts? That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough problem, and there's no easy solution. We probably need to try a few different things. Help people understand how to evaluate what they see in the media, encourage open and respectful conversations where people with different viewpoints can listen to each other, and build trust in reliable sources of information by focusing on shared values and understanding.
Well, thanks for joining us today on Meteorology Matters for this deep dive into a pretty complex topic. If this has piqued your interest and you want to learn more, we encourage you to check out the sources we talked about today and keep working on those critical thinking skills. And for more thought-provoking discussions, don't forget to follow meteorologist Rob Jones. He's on Instagram, meteorologist, TikTok, TV meteorologist, and on YouTube, you can subscribe to Rob Jones Hurricane. That's also where you'll find the playlist for this podcast, Meteorology Matters. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore the fascinating world of science.